doesn't remind me is a song by a band called Audioslave, and one of its little lyrics that's got there is a line which says, I like hammering nails and speaking in tongues because it doesn't remind me of anything. Which is a cool enough line, but probably really only makes sense if you put it into a Christian context. And I guess the old hammering of nails is a bit of a thing about the crucifixion, and a lot of people get that. But what is the speaking in tongues about? And I guess I had a conversation with some colleagues last week at work, and clearly they had no idea what speaking in tongues is, and so I thought I'd just kind of take the time to explain that to you today. I guess to understand it, we need to go back a step, don't we? And we kind of have to think about, well, who is God? And the reality is that God is a spirit. And so one of the things, one of the privileges that we have as Christians, that we can talk to God directly, and we call that prayer, but it's really just having a chat with God. And you can chat with God in whatever language you like. You can use English or French or Spanish or German or whatever it is you've got. And because God is God, He can understand all of those things. But with God, He's actually not limited by that. His ability to comprehend earthly languages is total and complete, and that's not a problem. But He can also understand spiritual languages. He's not limited to the languages that we have to speak on planet Earth at this particular point in time. And so one of the things that He gives us, one of the what we call them the gifts that He gives us, is this ability to speak in tongues. And by that we mean speaking not in our natural language, but in a spiritual language. In a language which actually makes no sense to us, but which makes perfect sense to God. And that's actually all right, really, because when you're getting down to prayer and talking to God, who is your audience? Well, I mean, sometimes people around you will hear, but actually that's not who you're talking to. You're talking to God. And so if He understands it, then that's totally fine, and that's great. That's all that really matters. So sometimes tongues can be quite a useful way of praying because you don't know the whole story or the whole situation. And maybe you don't need to know the whole story and the whole situation. Maybe you're praying for a friend and there's some, I don't know, issues in their relationship, and you don't need to ask in private what all the details are. But by speaking in tongues and allowing God to use that gift, you can pray really accurately and directly and honestly into the issue without actually knowing what the issues are. Because God knows what they are, and so He uses you to speak those things out, using just some other kind of spiritual language to do that. And that's great, that's fine, it's totally cool. But if God knows what the issues are, and He's going to talk about it in the language of His own choosing, then why does He bother using you to do that? And I guess that's part of the other great thing about speaking in tongues is that it's not just for the benefit of the person or persons that you're praying about. It actually does a whole lot for the person who's doing the speaking in tongues. It's about a stretch of that little thing that we call faith. And part of the challenge with faith is sometimes you need to let go of your intellect and what makes rational sense to you, and just step out there and just kind of trust that this God thing is there and going to catch you. And certainly for Western people like myself, it's a real challenge because we're taught to think things through and things should make sense and all the rest of it. But God's ways are a bit different to that, and this faith issue is a big one there. And so speaking in tongues is a simple, low-key way of kind of testing the water, if you like, and being fully and actively involved in that area of faith and of the Spirit. See, speaking tongues in that sense is not so much a good thing for God, but it's actually a really good thing for us. It develops those spiritual muscles and gets us into an area where we are out of control, where we are having to let go and surrender our control of everything and say, actually, God knows best, and I should just kind of go with what He's got going rather than what I think might be the best answer or solution to the situation. We sometimes say that seeing is believing, but with spiritual issues, sometimes you actually have to believe first in order to see. And tongues is one of those things. If you're going to wait till you understand it, then you'll never get there. It's just a faith thing that you do, trusting that what you're doing is the right thing. So you're speaking a language which makes no sense to you, but which God understands perfectly. And He uses that as a gift, one, to deal with issues in a direct way, but also to stretch and develop our faith and exercise some of our spiritual muscles. If you hear someone speaking in tongues, you don't need to be alarmed. They're quite safe, they're quite harmless, they're not going to take your money or anything like that. It's just them exercising a spiritual gift. And if you're feeling like you want to speak in tongues and you've got that gift, then I just really encourage you to be able to step out and use that. The Bible kind of talks about it being a private thing mostly. There's just something between you and God. And so it's great in that regard. It's great in that regard. It's not the whole thing, but it's a really good first step for many, many people. But most importantly, speaking in tongues is about surrender. God doesn't want your money, He wants you. And speaking in tongues and that surrender we make is just one of the ways that we give Him a part of who we are. So that's it. Speaking in tongues is God speaking through you in a spiritual language. It's as simple as that, and I hope that helps. Cheers.